A fierce-looking dog named Bruno roamed the vast wilderness, his muscles tense and eyes sharp. His coat was matted from days of struggle, each step heavy with exhaustion. Bruno had been wandering for what felt like an eternity, driven by an unyielding instinct to survive. Hunger gnawed relentlessly at his insides, making his powerful body, once strong from countless brutal fights, begin to weaken. Yet he moved forward, his determination unwavering despite the pain and fatigue that threatened to overpower him. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. Bruno's keen nose twitched as he sniffed the air, searching for any sign of food. His journey had been harsh, filled with moments of desperation and fleeting hope. Every night he found temporary shelter, only to wake up hungry and more determined than before to find something to eat. His instincts, sharpened by years of survival, kept him moving through the unforgiving landscape. As dusk turned to night, Bruno's thoughts were consumed by the relentless search for prey. He prowled through the tall grass, each movement calculated and precise, his body ready for the next hunt. His mind raced with the possibility of finding something to satisfy his growing hunger. The wilderness was both his home and his battleground, a place where only the strongest survived. Bruno's journey was a testament to his resilience, a story of a dog whose spirit refused to be broken despite the odds stacked against him. But little did Bruno know, his desperate search for food would lead him to an encounter that would change his life forever. An unexpected discovery awaited him, one that would stir emotions he had never felt before and set him on a path he could never have imagined. Bruno had been wandering for days, each sunrise marking another day of relentless searching. His paws were sore from walking over rough terrain, and his ribs protruded painfully beneath his thinning coat. The once formidable fighter was now a shadow of his former self, his energy drained by the constant battle against hunger and the harsh elements. Every step was a struggle, every breath a reminder of his dwindling strength. The nights were the hardest. As the temperature dropped, Bruno found himself shivering under whatever shelter he could muster. The cold seeped into his bones, making his body ache with every movement. He curled up in the shallow recesses of rocky outcrops, trying to keep warm. Yet even in these moments of rest, the pangs of hunger gnawed at him, making it impossible to fully relax. Food had become a distant memory, each meal a precious rarity. Bruno's mind was consumed by the need to find something to eat, the thought of prey driving him forward despite his weakened state. He remembered the fierce battles he had fought to survive, the adrenaline that once surged through his veins, now replaced by sheer desperation. His instincts were his only guide, pushing him to keep moving even when his body begged him to stop. The wilderness was unforgiving. Predators lurked in the shadows, and Bruno had learned to stay vigilant. He had outsmarted traps, evaded larger threats, and navigated treacherous landscapes, all in the pursuit of survival. Yet the odds were never in his favor. Each day was a test of his resilience, a challenge that he met head-on with unwavering determination. As days turned into nights, Bruno's spirit remained unbroken. He pushed himself to the limits, driven by an innate desire to live. The scent of prey was his only hope, a beacon that kept him moving forward through the darkness and despair. His journey was marked by moments of fleeting hope and crushing disappointment, each experience shaping him into a more determined and relentless survivor. Despite the hardships, Bruno held on to the belief that help was just around the corner. The memory of better times when he was strong and victorious fueled his determination. He refused to give in to the overwhelming hunger that threatened to consume him, choosing instead to fight against his own instincts in a bid to survive. Bruno's struggle was a testament to his indomitable will, a story of perseverance in the face of insurmountable odds. One crisp evening, as the sun began to set, Bruno's nose caught a faint, unfamiliar scent carried by the gentle breeze. It was unlike anything he had ever smelled, soft, sweet, and strangely comforting. His stomach growled at the unexpected aroma, a mix of curiosity and hunger stirring within him. Bruno's heart raced as he followed the scent, his body reacting instinctively to the possibility of finding food. As he moved through the tall grass, the scent grew stronger, blending with the earthy aroma of the wilderness. Bruno's keen senses picked up a faint sound, a soft, rhythmic noise that hinted at life. His pace quickened, muscles tense, as he navigated the dense underbrush toward the source. Each step brought him closer to the mystery that had captured his attention, sparking a glimmer of hope in his weary heart. Finally, through the thinning foliage, Bruno spotted a small bundle nestled among a pile of frayed blankets. It was a tiny human baby, barely a few weeks old, lying helpless and vulnerable. The baby's fragile cries were barely audible over the rustling of the grass, but they tugged at something deep within Bruno. His instincts, honed by years of survival, recognized the sound not as prey, but as a cry for help. Bruno froze, his powerful frame stilling as he took in the sight before him. The baby was small and defenseless, its eyes wide with fear and confusion. Bruno's initial reaction was to approach, driven by hunger and the scent that had led him here. But as he gazed upon the innocent face, something within him began to change. The raw, primal hunger that had been his constant companion now battled against a newfound sense of compassion. The baby lay quietly, its tiny chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. Bruno's instincts were conflicted, torn between the urge to satisfy his hunger and the inexplicable feeling of protectiveness that had taken root. He took a hesitant step forward, his nose mere inches from the child's fragile form, and let out a soft whine. The sound was unfamiliar, a mix of uncertainty and a deep, unspoken bond forming between them. In that moment, Bruno's world changed. The wilderness that had been his home and battleground now held a new purpose. The scent that had initially driven him forward was not that of prey, but of something far more precious: hope. Bruno realized that this tiny, helpless creature needed him, and despite his own suffering, he couldn't abandon it. The journey that had been a fight for survival was now a mission to protect and care for the innocent life before him. Bruno stood still, his powerful body casting a shadow over the tiny figure, nestled in the blankets. Every fiber of his being was alive, his senses heightened as he grappled with the conflicting emotions raging within him. Hunger clawed at him relentlessly, urging him to leave the baby and continue his desperate search for food. Yet another unfamiliar feeling surged within him, a protective instinct he had never experienced before. His mind raced, torn between survival and the newfound desire to safeguard this fragile life. Bruno took a step closer, his massive frame towering over the child. The baby whimpered softly, its cries weak and pitiful, stirring something deep within Bruno's hardened heart. The warmth emanating from the infant's body was comforting, a stark contrast to the cold, empty void that had consumed him for days. Bruno lowered his head, bringing his nose just inches from the baby's delicate form. He let out a soft whine, a sound of uncertainty and a silent promise to protect. The baby's scent was unfamiliar, yet it felt soothing, instilling a sense of calm in Bruno that he had long forgotten. His instincts wrestled within him, the primal urge to hunt battling against the profound need to guard the helpless child before him. As Bruno gazed down at the baby, his fierce instincts began to soften. The tension in his body eased, and his once rigid stance relaxed as he slowly approached the child. Bruno lay down beside the baby, his large body forming a protective barrier around it. He could feel the baby's warmth against him, hear its fragile heartbeat beneath the thin blankets. For the first time in his life, Bruno felt a connection that went beyond mere survival. The dusk deepened into night, and the air grew cooler, causing the baby to shiver slightly. Bruno instinctively nudged the child with his nose, offering some of his own warmth. The strange urge to protect the baby grew stronger, weaving itself around his hunger and quieting his survival instincts. A low growl rumbled from his stomach, reminding him of the constant battle within, but Bruno pushed the feeling aside, choosing to focus on the vulnerable life before him. Exhaustion weighed heavily on Bruno's body, but the protective instinct that had taken root within him gave him the strength to stay. He could not leave the baby alone in this harsh wilderness. Something about this tiny, defenseless creature had ignited a fierce loyalty in him. The bond between them was unspoken, but undeniable. a silent understanding that Bruno would do everything in his power to keep the child safe. As night fully embraced the wilderness, Bruno remained steadfast beside the baby, his presence a shield against the darkness and the dangers that lurked beyond. The internal battle between hunger and protection continued to rage, but Bruno's resolve had been solid. Despite the exhaustion weighing heavily on his muscles and the gnawing hunger that persisted, Bruno knew he couldn't stay where he was. The baby needed more than just his protection. They needed a safe place to rest and weather the night. Determined, Bruno gently picked up the corner of the baby's blanket in his teeth, lifting the child carefully from the cold ground. With the baby secure in his gentle grip, he pressed forward, each step a testament to his unwavering resolve. The landscape around them was vast and unforgiving, the tall grass swaying gently in the night breeze. Bruno navigated through the dense underbrush, his senses attuned to every sound and movement. The rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and the scent of damp earth filled his awareness, guiding him toward safety. Despite the strain in his muscles and the empty pit in his stomach, Bruno pressed on, his entire world narrowed down to a single purpose: keeping the baby safe. As they ventured deeper into the darkening landscape, the open, barren land began to give way to thicker brush and scattered trees. Each shadow seemed to flicker and shift, heightening Bruno's tension and keeping him on high alert. The scent of water drifted toward him, faint but unmistakable, igniting a spark of hope within him. Thirst burned at the back of his throat, and Bruno knew that both he and the baby needed water to sustain themselves. Driven by the urgency of their situation, Bruno quickened his pace, following the scent like a lifeline. The sound of a flowing creek reached his ears, providing a clear direction toward their next destination. The promise of water and a potential safe haven propelled Bruno forward, his determination growing stronger with each step. The landscape around them grew denser, the trees forming a protective barrier against the elements and any possible threats. Finally, through the thick bushes, Bruno caught sight of a small creek winding through a grove. Relief washed over him as he carefully set the baby down on the soft earth near the water's edge. He dipped his head into the cool, clear water, drinking deeply to quench his parched throat. The cold liquid soothed his burning thirst, providing a brief respite from the fatigue that weighed down his body. With his thirst temporarily satisfied, Bruno turned his attention back to the baby. He nudged the child's blanket closer to the water's edge, gently wetting its lips with his nose, in the hopes of reviving the little one. The baby stirred, its tiny hands reaching out instinctively toward the moisture. Bruno watched with cautious optimism as the child showed signs of life, a faint whimper escaping its lips. The strange urge to protect the child grew stronger, intertwining with his hunger and quieting his survival instincts. Bruno realized that his hunger would have to wait. The baby's well-being was now his primary concern. Despite his weakened state, Bruno felt a deep, primal loyalty to the helpless life before him. This bond gave him the strength to continue, even as his body trembled with exhaustion. With renewed determination, Bruno lifted his head, scanning the dim surroundings for any sign of danger. The area was open and exposed, but Bruno's instincts told him he needed to find shelter soon. He gently picked up the baby's blanket in his teeth once more, cradling the child securely as he began to pad forward through the darkening landscape. Every sound, every scent was meticulously processed by his keen senses, guiding him towards safety despite the challenges that lay ahead. Bruno's journey was far from over, but with each step he took, his resolve to protect the baby only grew stronger. The promise of finding a safe place to rest kept him moving forward, his spirit unbroken by the trials he had faced. The bond between the fierce fighter and the helpless child had transformed their journey into a mission of loyalty and love, a testament to the unexpected connections that can change lives forever. After what felt like an eternity of wandering, Bruno's perseverance was finally rewarded. Through the dense thicket, he spotted a cluster of large rocks forming a small overhang. It wasn't much, but it offered shelter from the harsh elements, a potential refuge for him and the baby. With cautious optimism, Bruno made his way toward the formation, the sight stirring a flicker of relief within him. As he approached the overhang, Bruno's senses remained on high alert. The area was still exposed, but the rocks provided a natural barrier against the wind and rain. He carefully laid the baby down within the shelter, ensuring that the child was positioned safely away from any potential threats. Bruno's large body naturally formed a protective shield around the tiny figure, his presence a silent promise of safety. The overhang offered only minimal protection, but it was enough to provide a temporary respite. Bruno curled up beside the baby, his thick fur offering additional warmth against the cool night air. The baby's breaths were shallow but steady, the gentle rise and fall of its chest a comforting rhythm in the quiet darkness. Bruno felt a deep sense of responsibility settling over him, his mission to protect the child more defined than ever. Nightfall deepened and the temperature continued to drop, causing the baby to shiver slightly. Bruno instinctively nudged the child with his nose, offering his own body heat in a silent gesture of care. The air grew colder, and Bruno could feel the chill seeping through the gaps in the rocks. Despite his own exhaustion and hunger, he remained steadfast, ensuring that the baby remained warm and safe. The sounds of the wilderness surrounded them, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, the rustling of leaves, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Bruno's ears remained perked, his senses attuned to any sign of danger. He couldn't afford to let his guard down, not when the baby's safety was at stake. The bond between them had solidified, transforming Bruno from a lone survivor into a devoted guardian. As the night wore on, Bruno's protective instincts took over. He stayed alert, his body tense and ready to respond to any threat that might emerge from the darkness. The baby slept fitfully, its tiny form nestled within the blankets, unaware of the peril that lurked outside the shelter. Bruno watched over the child with unwavering vigilance, his presence a constant source of comfort and security. In the stillness of the night, Bruno found a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life. The fierce fighter had become a gentle protector, his once hardened heart softened by the innocent life he had vowed to protect. The overhang provided only a temporary haven, but it was enough for Bruno to gather his strength and prepare for the challenges that awaited them in the coming days. As dawn broke, the first light of day filtered through the gaps in the rocks, signaling the start of a new day. Bruno stirred, his body stiff and sore from sleeping on the cold ground. The early morning air was crisp, the chill still lingering despite the rising sun. He shifted closer to the baby, wrapping himself around the child to share his body heat and provide additional warmth against the lingering cold. The child's breathing was soft and steady, the fragile rhythm a constant reminder of the life he was sworn to protect. Bruno's eyes stayed half closed, his senses still attuned to every sound and movement in the surrounding wilderness. He knew they couldn't stay in the same spot for long. The lack of proper shelter made them vulnerable to the elements and potential predators. Bruno lifted his head, glancing around their small rock shelter for any signs of danger. The area was still exposed, and the threats of the night were far from over. He needed to find a safer place, somewhere more enclosed that could shield them from the wind and provide better protection. The urgency to move was reignited, fueled by the lingering fear of what might come. Suddenly, a faint rustling sound reached Bruno's ears, snapping him to full alertness. His muscles tensed, ready to defend the child if needed. He sniffed the air, the unfamiliar scent sending a shiver down his spine. The footsteps drew nearer, each step measured and cautious as a figure approached the cabin. Bruno's heart raced as he recognized the presence. A woman, her attire indicating she was a hiker who had likely lost her way. She moved cautiously, her eyes scanning the area as she approached the abandoned shelter. Bruno's body remained rooted between her and the baby, a silent warning that he would protect the child at all costs. The woman hesitated, her face reflecting a mix of concern and confusion as she took in the scene before her. Her hands slowly lifted in a gesture of peace, her voice soft and gentle as she spoke to Bruno. "Hey there, boy," she said softly, her tone filled with compassion. "I'm not here to hurt you." Bruno's fierce demeanor softened slightly, though his body remained tense. He had been through too much to let his guard down easily, but there was something in her voice, a gentle sincerity, that resonated with him. The woman took a cautious step forward, her eyes fixed on the baby. She could see that the child was alive but fragile, and her heart ached at the sight of Bruno's protective stance. As she reached out to brush her fingers against the baby's blanket, the child stirred, its tiny hands reaching out instinctively. Bruno leaned forward, watching her every move, sensing her good intentions. The woman's face hardened with resolve as she realized the gravity of the situation. She quickly dialed her phone, her voice trembling with emotion as she spoke into the device. "Yes, I found them," she said urgently. "There's a baby and a dog. You won't believe this. He's been protecting the child. Yes, we'll need emergency services. Please hurry." She glanced back at Bruno, her eyes filling with tears as she whispered, "You did so well. You kept this baby safe. You're a hero." Bruno's gaze remained steady, but something in her words stirred a feeling of calm within him. He had done his duty, and now help was on its way. For the first time since he had started his journey, Bruno felt a sense of peace settle over him. The stillness of the early morning was abruptly shattered by the sound of approaching sirens. Emergency vehicles were nearing the cabin, their lights casting intermittent glows through the trees. Bruno perked up, his exhaustion momentarily lifted by the prospect of rescue. However, the tranquility was short-lived as another sound reached his ears, a low, menacing growl that sent a chill down his spine. Bruno's eyes narrowed as he sensed movement in the shadows. He could see the glint of eyes peering from the underbrush, followed by another set and then another. A pack of coyotes had been lurking nearby, waiting for any sign of weakness to exploit. Their eyes gleamed hungrily as they spotted Bruno and the baby, their bodies low to the ground and ready to strike. Without hesitation, Bruno stood his ground, his powerful body tensed and ready to defend the child. A low growl rumbled deep in his throat, warning the approaching predators to stay away. The coyotes advanced slowly, their intent clear as they closed in on Bruno and the baby. The air was thick with tension as the two groups faced off, the wilderness holding its breath in anticipation. Bruno's entire being was focused on protecting the baby, his eyes fixed on the advancing coyotes. The hunger that had plagued him for days was momentarily forgotten, replaced by a fierce determination to keep the child safe. The lead coyote stepped forward, its teeth bared in a menacing snarl, eyes narrowed with deadly intent. Bruno growled louder, his sharp teeth exposed in a clear warning. The first coyote lunged at Bruno, its speed surprising despite its smaller size. Bruno met the attack head-on, his jaws snapping and catching the coyote's shoulder. The animal yelped in pain and retreated momentarily, only to be replaced by another predator from the left. Bruno twisted, managing to land a blow on the coyote's hind leg, but the third coyote darted forward with deadly precision, sinking its teeth into his shoulder. Pain shot through Bruno's body, but he refused to back down. He snarled in frustration, jerking his body to shake off the relentless attackers. Despite the pain that seared through him, Bruno stood firm, his growls deep and menacing. The coyotes circled him, their numbers seeming to grow as more predators joined the fray. Bruno's strength was fading, but his resolve remained unbroken. The leader of the pack hesitated, its eyes meeting Bruno's unwavering gaze. There was something in Bruno's stance, a fierce loyalty and determination, that gave the coyotes pause. Slowly, one by one, the predators began to back away, their eyes lingering on Bruno before they melted back into the underbrush. The tension dissipated as the coyotes retreated, leaving Bruno alone with his wounds and the baby. Breathing heavily, Bruno stayed alert, his gaze fixed on the shadows until he was certain the threat had passed. His body ached from the fight, fresh wounds stinging with every movement. But he ignored the pain, turning back to the baby with a wave of relief washing over him. The baby's faint cries had quieted, and Bruno nudged the blanket into place, ensuring the child remained safe. Despite everything he had protected the baby from, Bruno knew the dangers were far from over. The immediate threat had been repelled, but the wilderness was still a place of constant peril. With one last nudge to the baby's blanket, Bruno picked up the child once more, his resolve stronger than ever. They had survived the encounter, but Bruno understood that their journey was far from complete. The presence of the coyotes had reinforced the urgency to find a truly safe haven, where they could finally rest without fear. Bruno limped toward the cabin, each step a testament to his resilience and dedication. His shoulder throbbed where the coyote had bitten him, but he pressed on, driven by the need to protect the child he had grown to care for deeply. The sight of the abandoned cabin brought a renewed sense of hope, knowing that shelter and safety were within reach. Bruno's journey was a battle not just for survival, but for the life of the innocent child who had unexpectedly become his responsibility. With his injuries aching and his body weary from the recent confrontation, Bruno knew he had to make one final push toward safety. The abandoned cabin stood just a short distance ahead, its dilapidated structure offering a semblance of shelter from the elements. Despite the pain that shot through his shoulder, Bruno's determination did not waver. He had come too far and formed too strong a bond with the baby to turn back now. As he approached the cabin, Bruno encountered a steep hill slick with morning dew blocking their path. The slope was treacherous, the mud beneath his paws making each step a challenge. Bruno glanced up at the incline, assessing the difficulty of the climb with the baby in his mouth and his own body weakened from hunger and injury. It would be a hard climb, but he had no choice. The safety of the baby depended on his ability to overcome this obstacle. Lowering his head, Bruno took the first cautious step onto the hill, his paws sinking into the muddy slope with each movement. His muscles screamed in protest, the effort of climbing taking a toll on his already exhausted body. Bruno dug his claws into the slippery ground, using every ounce of his strength to maintain his balance. His breathing grew heavy, each inhale a struggle as he pushed himself upward. Halfway up the hill, Bruno slipped once whilst nearly losing his grip. Instinctively, he steadied himself, growling softly in frustration. The pain from his shoulder throbbed, but he pressed on, step by step, each movement a testament to his unwavering commitment to the child. The tiny heartbeat he carried in his mouth served as a constant reminder of his purpose, driving him forward despite the overwhelming fatigue. As he neared the top of the hill, Bruno could see the clearing that lay beyond, a small space where the cabin stood, partially obscured by the morning fog. The sight of the structure renewed his hope, pushing him to muster the last of his strength. With one final, determined push, Bruno reached the summit, his legs quivering beneath him from the effort. He paused for a moment, panting heavily, before continuing down the other side of the hill toward the cabin. The final stretch was still a challenge, but Bruno's resolve remained unbroken. He glanced back to ensure the baby was safe, then made his way toward the cabin, each step slower but more purposeful. The promise of safety was within reach, and Bruno was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Bruno reached the cabin. He carefully pushed the door open with his shoulder, letting it creak loudly as it swung inward. Dust filled the air, stirred by his movement, but the shelter offered a haven from the harsh elements outside. Bruno laid the baby down gently within the cabin, positioning himself between it and the door. The structure was small and worn, but it provided the enclosed protection they desperately needed. Bruno curled up beside the baby once more, his body acting as a shield against any lingering threats. The exhaustion in his muscles was now overshadowed by a sense of accomplishment and relief. They had made it to safety, but Bruno knew that their journey was far from over. The cabin offered a temporary refuge, a place where they could rest and recover before continuing their search for a more permanent sanctuary. The arrival of emergency services brought a wave of relief that Bruno hadn't felt in days. The woman who had discovered the cabin, still visibly shaken but filled with gratitude, coordinated the rescue operation. Bruno watched as paramedics approached, their movements cautious but determined. He remained vigilant, his protective instincts still honed from the earlier confrontation, ensuring that no further threats approached the sanctuary he had found. One of the paramedics, an older man with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, knelt beside Bruno. He spoke softly, his voice filled with understanding and empathy. "Hey there, buddy," he said gently, reaching out a hand to let Bruno catch his scent. "You did a good job keeping this little one safe." Bruno's growl faded, replaced by a subtle relaxation as he sensed the man's genuine kindness. The paramedic carefully scooped the baby into his arms, wrapping it securely in a clean, warm blanket. The child let out a soft whimper, and Bruno's ears perked up, watching intently as the paramedic ensured the baby's safety. The sirens grew louder as more emergency vehicles arrived, their presence signaling the end of Bruno's long journey. As the paramedics prepared to transport the baby to the waiting ambulance, Bruno's attention remained fixed on them. He could feel the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him, but the sight of the baby being carried away filled him with a sense of accomplishment. He had fulfilled his mission, protecting the child against all odds. Despite his own suffering, Bruno felt a deep sense of pride and relief. One of the rescuers approached Bruno, kneeling beside him once more. She placed a gentle hand on his side, soothing his weary body. "Easy there, big guy," she murmured softly. "You're coming with us too." Bruno allowed himself to be guided toward the ambulance, his body finally giving in to the overwhelming fatigue that had been building for days. He collapsed onto a soft blanket laid out for him, the first time he had allowed himself to fully relax since he had found the baby. As Bruno lay there, his eyes fluttering shut, he could hear the murmurs of the rescuers around him. Their voices were filled with awe as they spoke about his bravery and loyalty. News of his heroic journey had spread quickly, and by the time they reached the hospital, a small crowd had gathered, eager to catch a glimpse of the dog who had defied his own instincts to protect a helpless child. Cameras flashed, capturing Bruno's scarred but steadfast form, while people spoke in hushed, reverent tones about his incredible act of courage. At the hospital, Bruno was carefully lifted from the ambulance and taken inside. One of the rescuers reached out, gently scratching him behind the ears. "You're a hero, you know that?" she whispered, her eyes misting with emotion. Bruno, though barely conscious, gave a soft huff, resting his head back down. He had done what he had set out to do. He had saved the child and ensured its safety. Bruno's wounds were treated, his fur cleaned, and his hunger soothed with food and water. Yet even as he drifted in and out of sleep, his thoughts seemed to circle back to the baby he had protected. The story of Bruno's protective journey had touched the hearts of many, inspiring admiration and respect from all who heard it. The once fierce fighter had become a beloved hero, his legacy a testament to the power of loyalty and love. The days that followed Bruno's heroic act brought a sense of peace and healing. The young couple who had recently suffered the heartbreak of being unable to have children heard about Bruno's story and were deeply moved by his loyalty and bravery. Drawn to the hospital by the tale of survival and the unbreakable bond between the dog and the baby, they reached out to offer their support. A few days later, Bruno was introduced to the couple, who had already fallen in love with him through the stories shared by the rescuers. The woman knelt beside him, stroking his head with gentle hands, her voice filled with gratitude. "You saved our little one," she whispered softly. "We'd love for you to be with us." Bruno looked up at her, something deep within him stirring. This was more than just shelter. It was a family. The couple adopted the baby, and Bruno was welcomed into their home with open arms. The transformation was remarkable. From a dog built to fight, scarred by the harshness of the wilderness, Bruno became a gentle guardian in a warm, loving environment. The scars of his past began to fade, both physically and emotionally, replaced by the softness of a new life he had protected so fiercely. In their new home, Bruno found a sense of belonging he had never known before. Each morning, he would wake beside the baby, watching over it as it slept. His powerful frame served as a gentle guard, his presence a constant source of comfort and security. The couple provided him with the care and affection he had long been denied, healing his wounds and soothing his hunger with regular meals and tender attention. Bruno's days were filled with peace, warmth, and purpose. He no longer roamed aimlessly, driven solely by survival instincts. Instead, he had a mission: to watch over the child he had saved and to be a beloved member of the family. The once battered and broken dog had been transformed by the very life he had protected, his heart healing through the act of loyalty and love. The bond between Bruno and the baby grew stronger each day. The child would giggle and reach out with tiny hands, tugging at Bruno's ears, while the dog lay still, his eyes gentle and full of understanding. Their connection was unbreakable, a testament to the journey they had shared and the love that had blossomed from an unlikely beginning. Months passed, and Bruno became an inseparable part of his new family. His days were filled with joy and fulfillment, each moment spent watching over the baby reinforcing his sense of purpose. The once fierce fighter had found peace in the warmth of a loving home, his scars healing as he embraced his role as a guardian and companion. The story of Bruno and the baby spread throughout the community, becoming a quiet legend that inspired others. People were moved by the tale of resilience, loyalty, and the transformative power of kindness. Bruno's journey from abandoned and broken to deeply loved served as a reminder that even the hardest of hearts could be softened by love and that unexpected bonds could become the strongest. Bruno's new life was a reflection of the love and care he now received. The family shared laughter and warmth, their home filled with the sounds of a happy, thriving child and the gentle presence of a loyal dog. Every morning, Bruno would watch over the baby as it slept, his heart full with a sense of belonging and contentment. In the backyard, the family often gathered, the baby toddling on the grass with Bruno close by. The mother would smile as she watched the two together, her heart swelling with gratitude for the dog who had once been a fighter but had become the gentlest of guardians. She knelt beside Bruno, running her hand along his thick, warm fur, whispering words of appreciation and love. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the yard, Bruno lay down with the baby curled up beside him. They drifted off together, peaceful and safe in the warmth of their new world. Bruno's last thoughts before sleep took him were simple yet profound. He was home, and he was loved. The legacy of Bruno and the baby continued to inspire those who heard their story. It was a testament to the resilience of the spirit, the depth of loyalty, and the transformative power of love. Bruno had shown that even the most unexpected bonds could become the strongest, and that kindness could heal even the hardest of hearts. Their story remained a quiet legend, a beacon of hope, and a reminder of the enduring power of compassion and love. If you were moved by Bruno's incredible journey, please like and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories. Share this tale with friends and family to spread the message of resilience, loyalty, and the transformative power of kindness. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life, reminding us all of the unexpected bonds that can change lives forever. Thank you for watching, and remember to cherish the love and connections that make our world a better place.